Thank you.
Can I say something, Emma?
Blessing and Charity, and then Leon and Richard. Sorry, I see your hands. Go on. Yeah.
I had a question when Blessing was speaking about the issue of why Adam was created first and how it's supposed to teach the issue of counterpart in connection with God existing first, I think you say something like that, and then humanity coming later, and then having to be the counterpart to God. So in my mind, maybe it's me not understanding his thought, but it just brought a question to me that wouldn't that imply that then Adam would still be superior to Eve, if you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely, that's my first thought about that as well, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't go to parable. I think we were trying not to go to parable straight away, but I understand you were answering the question. Well, Blessing was answering the question, whether he thought about that question before and what conclusion he'd come to. So I'm guessing that's a conclusion I suppose we'd all go down, is this must be a parable of some kind. So is this a parable about God and humanity? In which case there is something about being superior, but I think we could still use that from, when Blessing said about the physical characteristics, how important were those physical differences? Because then you question, why was Adam a bit taller, from Ellen White's account, head and shoulders above Eve, and stronger? And physically now, even, we know that most of the time males are stronger than females, and that's what leads to, adds to the patriarchy and the oppression. But there's something there about, in my mind anyway, about God being superior, stronger, but not using that superiority or that strength in any way to oppress the other one and to be equal. There's something about being equal that Adam and Eve are still made equal, even though he's taller. There's none physical description in there. We get that from Ellen White. It doesn't say anywhere here that Adam was stronger and bigger. The whole point seems to be Adam's first out of the earth, and then Eve second out of the rib. And I think that's what I appreciated in the class. I think for Leon's benefit and anyone else who hasn't seen it, that we approached it trying not to use Ellen White quotes about, her being equal side by side with the rib, and not trying to use what Ellen White has said, and trying looking at it, stepping back and saying, okay, what was the possible reason for this? Why was Adam made first? Why was he made from the dust of the earth? So we started with that one. We had three things. I think that's why I put three things up there. And I was going to ask what the three things were.
Could we say, Emma, that Adam was physically had more strength, but then Eve equally was physically, not physically, emotionally, mentally, had more strength in that direction too. Then you put them together and they become as one.
Okay, so different physically.
Sorry, Emma, could I take you back just one step?
Yes, okay. Sorry, Leon and Richard have got their hands up. I know, and Cedric just came in there, but
sorry.
Responding to the point, but I know people are waiting. Go on, Blessing. Did you want to clarify on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask how the issue of God being there and then humanity coming and Adam and Eve sequence implies superiority. I didn't understand that.
I think that was Charity's point about, could we not say then, if Adam's stronger and made first, and is supposed to be kind of a parable or a symbol of God, and then Eve is a symbol of humanity, couldn't we then say, well, God is superior to humans, therefore Adam is superior to Eve? We're going to use that. I guess that might be a circular argument, but I think that's what Charity was saying, is it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
Yeah.
Where does E.G. White say that Adam was stronger then?
Because, the reason why I didn't understand it is because the story itself is about equality. So superiority would be irrelevant. That's why I couldn't get it.
I don't know where in E.G. White says stronger. I've never heard that one before.
I don't know if she actually says stronger. She says taller.
Yeah, I don't think she says stronger though, does she?
Okay, when I
No,
was saying stronger, I was just saying based on statistics. And
yeah,
that
statistics
men
now.
are on average bigger and stronger than
Oh,
women. Or let me say males are
And
on
I,
average.
and I suppose the implication is if they're quite a bit taller, that they would be stronger.
well, don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, women to give birth, I mean, carry a baby for 10 months and give birth, that shows a strength there.
Right. So you're saying I think Cedric's point is she's trying to show that there's different strengths, and just because physical strength is one thing doesn't mean superiority. So I
Yeah,
suppose I was trying to struggle with Blessing's point about superiority. We're talking about quality. Yes, but we're combating, I think, when someone says, why was Adam made first? We know it's probably coming from a patriarchal angle, and that we're asking that question because of patriarchy and saying, why did God do it that way? Because it's just bought into the fact that Adam is first and better and stronger and whatever. And so that, and more important, therefore, patriarchy has there's some grounds for patriarchy. So I suppose that's why Charity made that comment about, well, we could, even if we say that, couldn't we say that that's, even if we say it's a parable, can't we then say, well, Adam was made stronger and bigger, therefore is superior? Because it can kind of buy into that argument. Does that make sense, Blessing?
Okay, I think we can move on because I still don't understand. Like I understand how someone could use it, like, but it wouldn't be correct necessarily. Why I'm saying that is if the story is about counterpart, differences don't matter. So if someone is stronger, if someone is externally, bigger than the other person, and we're saying they're equal, then it would be, I mean, you were saying it's a counterpart, then those differences are irrelevant.
Yes.
That's why I'm struggling with understanding that.
So your point about the physical differences is they are irrelevant. Well, you asked how important are they anyway at the beginning, that they've got different physical characteristics. I suppose
Yes,
that's another
I'm
question
saying
we
they're
could ask.
irrelevant to the story of equality, because when you say equality, something is the same as the other thing. So it means differences are irrelevant. So to say
If you
God is
establish the fact
superior,
that they are, if you establish the fact that they are equal, because that's in question, isn't it, with a lot of people?
yes.
So I suppose
so I was just saying, when you then bring the story to humanity and God, and we're saying humanity is a counterpart of God, whatever superiority you might think God has is irrelevant in that story because it's a story of equality.
Okay, so because from the very beginning that God had made it as the counterpart, humans, that means the counterpart is the fit that, the part that fits perfectly with the other and it's incomplete without it. There's two pictures of counterpart, aren't there, really, which is kind of equal but different in a way. So one is that the key to a lock, so they're different, but they can't exist without the other one. So the lock is useless without the key. And so that's one definition of counterpart, but the other one is identical copy, which is even closer to, I suppose, which is even more amazing. But I suppose with the Godhead, we'd probably go with the lock and key. But also we're made in the image, so we are an exact replica in some ways, physical form and a character. Well, not physical form so much, but go on.
So I've got a point based upon that. So,
yeah.
Well, first of all, let me just mention Ellen White a second.
Mm-hmm.
In that same quote, what you just copied and pasted, she also talks about Adam being a protector, protecting Eve.
Is that the same one? Okay.
And I'm wondering, is that coming from a patriarchal mindset? Because in society now, it's it said men are the protectors, men are the providers, men are this, men are that, and women are the weaker vessels. So I'm wondering if she's just a product of her environment.
Oh, is that the question
about Sister White?
I don't know if you. Has he cut out? Leon, is that your question? Can't hear him at all. Can anyone else hear him?
Gone.
Maybe there's an emphasis of what comes first, you know, because there's a big emphasis of on the firstborn. There's something about the firstborn, and that stems from patriarchy as well. So maybe because Adam came first, because we made a big emphasis of being first, maybe there's nothing wrong with coming, you know, being born first or being born second, you know. But my last point, you know, in Genesis 1:26, where it talks about God created man in his image, you know, male and female, and then it says, let them, you know, have dominion over the earth and so on, and have dominion over the animals. So there was kind of given out like an equal partnership, equal role to do. So like that reflects the Godhead, like the image, like what you said, Emma, that was to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. But that was God's original intent. Like that was the mind of God. So if you go to Genesis 5:1.
2.
So Genesis 5:1 and 2, yeah, it talks about God made man in the likeness of God, made he him, man and female, and blessed them and called the name Adam. And then in verse 3, it says, and Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness. So now, remember now, this is after sin. So now, you know, they're living in a patriarchal world now. So that, when it says, he had a son in his own likeness, that was a repeat of that image of God, but that image of God was broken down now. So now God's original model is broken.
Mm-hmm.
So that likeness is a patriarchal likeness. So it says, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and he called his name Seth. That image is now a broken image. Can we say it's like a patriarchal image? And that just got repeated from then all the way up until now. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. So now instead of being in the image of God per se, although it's the image of God as well, perhaps, but it's tainted, it's marred, it's in the image of Adam creates Seth in his own image.
Yeah, so there's something about, and remember, it's just mentioned the son, the female's not mentioned, the daughter's not mentioned. It just talks about the man. So there's something about the male, but also the firstborn as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Adam being created first, I think it's coming from the mindset of this. It comes from this broken image.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe look at it from a different angle. Is it? Maybe, I don't know. Like if Eve was born first, would we be making these same, you know, conclusions? I don't know.
Or would we have made the same mistakes? As Natalie said at the beginning, we're a matriarchal society, and then women would be superior, and it would be all down the women's line. And then obviously this is Moses writing it 2,000 years after it's happened. So now he's doing it as the generations of the men, because probably that's what the Egyptians did as well. They traced all the lineage through the men. So he's doing the same thing.
They might necessarily, if that's the case in the generations of the men, it doesn't always mean that they're going to be the firstborn either.
Why not? It might be. No, I was going
to say it doesn't have to be. I was going to say it'd probably fall onto the men, because the men were given more privilege. So you know, he could have. Well, Adam could have had a daughter, but if he had a son afterwards, the God would have mentioned the son.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, it doesn't always fall on the first.
No, the firstborn technically is the firstborn male. Yeah. Richard, did you have a point on this? Or not on this, if you remember what you were going to say?
My limited little understanding, God of heaven knew he was bringing equality in his creation, and he knew there was going to recreate, and the original plan was, you know, his image, the Godhead's image. So God seemed to want to teach Adam equality by letting him name the animals, and for Adam to realize where's his partner. So some kind of lesson in there for equality. for Adam, but originally it was the Godhead, and the Godhead are eternal. They're always existed. So I don't know, it's something there. I mean, it's a good conversation. I like what Leon said. But I don't like the fact that it was a repeat, a patriarchal repeat in the image of Adam, because then it excluded the Godhead. So the original plan was to be images of the Godhead. And Adam asked for, his partner. So it seemed like God wanted to teach him some kind of lesson of equality outside the Godhead or inside the Godhead, because it's only equality in marriage as well. As human, as others duplicate, while they're not married, male and female, there's no equality there. It's only in the marriage that there's equality, because they become one. Two become one. There's things that I don't understand, but my limited understanding just see those little things.
So you're saying that in the creation of, or at least when Adam names the animals, Adam sees the lead of Eve. And
yes, so he had to be taught. He had to be taught equality.
About equality.
Adam had to be taught equality.
That there's going to be, you need something equal with you to meet your need or whatever, and that you need to be the same
to you, yes,
level.
So that you could go and do the same as what these animals are going to do, but obviously different because he's got dominion over them. But there's some kind of lesson there within the Godhead that we're not like comprehending properly because of sin, because the plan never came to pass, how God originally purposed it to be.
Yeah. So Curtis put in the chat, well, I guess it asks again what equality means in essence. So, yeah, possibly. Come to that in a second. I know Blessing and Charity, you've got your hand up as well.
Are you saying we should speak now, or you do?
Yes, go on. I think because Richard, have you finished?
Oh, okay. I have a question about the earliest generations that lived. Like Adam, was Adam patriarchal in his behavior? Because for me, I don't know if we have evidence of that about Adam being patriarchal.
He never pursued after Eve once she left his side, so there's evidence that he wasn't.
Because I mean, if you look at Genesis 5, this genealogy again was written by Moses after maybe 2,000 plus years. And he obviously, in his mind, had entrenched the idea of patriarchy and the priesthood of the firstborn, and all those things that come with it. Women are totally forgotten in that story. Because I find it hard to believe that Adam didn't think that Eve was important simply because they ate that fruit and that was the end of quality. Because I understand, their relationship with the world, with God, their capability to understand truth had changed and they had to go through this restorative process. I do understand that. But did that necessarily mean that the earliest generations were patriarchal? And when I say the earliest generations, I'm not talking about people that chose to kill, because I know in this same story of the or is it Genesis 4? But anyway, Genesis 4, 5, somewhere there. When he talks about those that followed the example of Cain, there's clear evidence that very quickly, even the way they viewed women was very problematic. And we've got Lamech, who is the first documented polygamist, at least. There might have been others. I'm not so sure if those that followed God and were remorseful for what had happened followed the same pattern, at least not early on. Because I know by the time you get to Abraham and them, there's a lot of muddying of the waters, a lot of idolatry. There's just a lot that has corrupted the earth and influenced even those that followed God, that they were following some of the practices of I'll say the wicked or the bad people. But I'm questioning particularly the earliest people like Adam and Seth, that do they really operate that way? Or it's us projecting that onto them because of what we read from Moses, who excluded the women altogether. That's my question.
I think we project it onto Adam.
Yeah, I don't think, well, I certainly wasn't thinking that Adam was behaving, that we have any evidence to show that Adam was sexist in that sense. After the first sin, we don't seem to have any evidence that he did anything wrong. Again, it doesn't mean he didn't, but it's kind of speculation what happened after that.
But Emma, where in the Bible does it talk about the first mention of equality?
Well, it depends what you mean, because we kind of highlighted at Genesis 5, didn't we? Called them Adam, that they're both the same.
So that's what we termed as equality.
Well, I've certainly used that as an illustration of equality, but I don't know. Maybe Curtis has some light on that because he raised the point about equality, perhaps.
And God saying that they gave them dominion over the earth, over the sea, over the fish.
Yeah, so the fact that they were given the same job and they were to have equal authority over the earth, because if we say that equality is connected to power and authority, I mean, obviously there's a few ways we could look at equality. So I suppose that's what's in question. What is equality? And I know that was one of the classes we had. Did you see that one?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Curtis, did you want to comment on this? Was it a separate point?
There was something that Richard had said that made me type that, but I can't remember what it was. But I think I guess in part what I had thought about that is sparked on by what you brought out now, is when we think about Adam and Eve and the creation, and you mentioned they had the same job, and I think you can see it when it says they were given dominion. But if you were to break it down and look at different examples, I think we could illustrate that they didn't have the same job in managing the garden, and for instance, and I think that would show that that's not the equality that we highlight or that God is seeking. For instance, I mean, we know that from the Godhead, in that they have different jobs, each of those three beings, but yet there's an equality that we draw or highlight between them. So I wouldn't think that it's necessarily related to the jobs that they do, or this idea that
the physique.
they were both called Adam to be given dominion and etc. I think there's more to that equality, and I guess it was brought up in those studies that you're talking about, Emma. But I can't remember why I originally said it.
So how can you remember what we said in the class about equality?
Yeah.
What was the definition? Yeah, go on.
I think the key aspect of equality that was brought out.
Or maybe actually pause that there. Maybe those who haven't seen it, what they think equality is before we give the answer. Perhaps, sorry, that was me. But okay. So like Cedri or Richard, I know Richard's probably seen them. Leon, maybe Cedri, who hasn't seen them, what do you understand by the word equality? What does it mean?
Who are you talking to?
You, Cedri, first, yeah.
Oh,
and then
me.
And then maybe Leon, if he's still there.
Well, I think regardless of who they are and what they look like and their strength, that they both treated the same. That's what equality would mean to me. So even if Adam was born first and he's physically bigger and maybe stronger, that doesn't mean to say that he's that there's any difference between him and Eve, because Eve equally is emotionally, probably even spiritually and mentally stronger too, in a different way. So what I'm saying is not to look so much at the physical body, although we can deduce from that because there's other aspects to it too. I mean, if Eve is if a man is just strong in strength and not emotionally or mentally strong, then the woman would make that up. So she would come with her strengths and he would come with his strengths, and together it would be like almost one strength. And that to me is equality. They both have strengths, and they may be different, but it's equally the same.
So there's something around looking different, but having different qualities and different strengths, both being human, both being made in God's image, but there's something that this person has different qualities, different physical characteristics than this person, and there's something there about difference but being equal. And it's teaching us there's something about it's okay to be different. It doesn't mean, and we've obviously latched onto that, or some people have, that Adam is stronger and bigger, therefore superior. That's one argument that's made. And so I suppose it's moving away from that and saying whatever differences they had, whatever way God did it, it's not for one to be superior to the other. It was all about equality. They were equal partners, counterparts, even though they had different characteristics. There's something about that illustrating more that people are different but go together and they make up for those, that the blend of the two, there's something missing without the whole picture.
Exactly. The two make a whole. When they two come together, they make a whole. And it's interesting, I'm just thinking of birth and creation, that when I wonder how long after Adam did Eve come along. Was it 9-10 months, like getting pregnant and giving birth as a woman? When Debbie mentioned that Eve was already in Adam, that's an interesting concept too. But could we say that seed was there? Like you have that seed when a woman is pregnant. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, like the whole concept that women are born with all the seeds they're ever going to have, and there's a limited number in there, and they're all in there. I don't know how far...
No. I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about the whole pregnancy thing. That's how creation came about through that pregnancy, through the gestation, and through like 10 months is a period when a woman gives birth, 40 weeks. So was Eve, who came out of Adam, was it 40 weeks afterwards? It's just a thought anyway.
Right, like illustration of a kind of a birth scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, I think sometimes we want to make it, I think one of the points that came, I don't know what people got from camp meeting overall, because that was linking to a thought I had when you said that what's our problem? I think one of the biggest problems that we're trying to tackle through all this camp meeting, it may not have been said on screen though, but it's the principle of what do we keep doing?
What do we keep doing?
You kind of did it then by saying, I wonder if it was 40 weeks after.
I see. Just I think trying to understand it ourselves, trying to make sense of it.
Then. Yeah.
And using that kind of concept.
Yes, that's okay to do that. But I suppose the way we try to understand it is we tend to focus on, maybe I'm not asking the question very well.
You saying culture? Culture.
Go ahead, somebody, whoever was first. I don't know who unmuted.
I was getting confused about what you were talking about just now, whether it's the question, the whole thing, if you can repeat that, please.
Yeah, sorry, I think it's because it led me down this, to ask this, that one of the principles I think that came out of the camp meeting for me was that we keep on doing something. And when Cedric did that about trying to say whether Eve came out of Adam 40 weeks later, because she was linking the fact that the seed of Eve was already in Adam, was kind of what Debbie said at the beginning, that Eve was already in Adam, so they were both there to begin with, really, because she was in there. And then obviously Curtis made the point, well, Adam was in the earth then, that means he was already there at creation, so I don't know if we can use that argument. But when she did that now, Cedric's saying if she came out of Adam, it's a bit like a birth, and maybe she maybe she came out 40 weeks later, maybe she was created 40 weeks later, because a birth gestation is about 40 weeks. What's she doing when she does that?
Maybe, well, I don't know if it's an answer to your question, but perhaps it's that we keep trying to run away from the reality of what happened. I can put it like explain away what took place to make it more palatable for us.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Possibly, yeah. That's one thing we do as well. We're trying to explain it. Well, obviously, we're trying to combat constantly patriarchy, I think.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find a reason why it isn't patriarchal,
yeah.
which is, I think, is reasonable, because we're saying we know it's equal at the beginning. So let's see, where did this come from? How can we trace it so that it isn't patriarchal? Maybe that's the wrong way of approaching it, but I think we are at the back of our heads trying to. But I was more getting to the fact that we constantly make things literal. So now we're literally going to say birth takes 40 weeks. Therefore, Eve came forth 40 weeks after Adam, because it's birth and it's literal story of birth. But I think, as I guess Blessings alluded to, the fact that this is, everything's a parable. And we're not necessarily going there, first of all, because we're trying to establish why God literally did it this way first. But we keep on wanting to put everything, make everything literal. So we keep on trying to literally apply things instead of make application of it properly. And maybe that wasn't a complete illustration of that, but that's what it reminded me of.
Emma, sorry.
Yes, go on.
Is it us trying to come up with circular arguments that confirm our position, basically, instead of trying to be objective about the information we have in front of us? Like, is that what we constantly do?
Yeah, we have a bias. You mean, are we constantly trying to not see it as patriarchal?
Yes, I was just saying, in answer to your question, that what is it that we constantly do? So I'm saying, is it this thing where we look at the information and try and deal with it in such a way that avoids any semblance of patriarchy whatsoever, or inequality, or anything that seems to give bait to, I'll say, our enemies, but I don't really mean enemies, but people that don't see things the way we do.
I don't think that's wrong, though, is it? I don't think that's a mistake we make, is it? Would you say that was a mistake we make? Because I think we're required to see a different side of God. I guess we're required on one level to prove that God isn't patriarchal, because patriarchy's done so much damage.
Okay, maybe you're not understanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we are required to do that, but because we want so much to avoid any semblance of patriarchy, we then come up with arguments that are not as robust, because that's what I am saying.
Right, okay, I was going to say,
yeah.
Because we're so bent towards wanting to see that it isn't patriarchal, we'll come up with things that are not wholly sound. I think we used to say, this is not wholly sound.
Yes. Yeah. So for example, just so that you understand my point, when we say men are on average stronger than, or males are on average stronger than females, there's normally a reaction. We try and find a way to say women are strong, and I'm like, okay, is that really dealing with our issue? Are we really supporting our argument for equality and what equality really is? So statistically, scientifically, it's a proven fact, but I don't think it takes away from our equality message. But we can then tend to want to, find some type of counter argument to actually say, no, men and women are actually the same. So we end up not being intellectually honest to the information we have in front of us, for fear that it will undermine our position. So that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that is a mistake that we've made probably as Adventists as well. That it's just, we don't use even in the movement, we've got a track record of doing that, I think, of trying to prove that what we're saying is right, and then recognizing actually the methodology for this wasn't completely right. So it was going back to what equality is, and I know Cedri said, regardless of difference, they're both treated the same. And we talked about when two come together, they make a whole. What's the problem with saying when two come together, they make a whole? So I suppose that's a bit like the counterpart argument.
Well, I don't know what
answer. Whole inequality.
Okay. Curtis had his hand up, sorry.
I was going to say what I had typed in the chat is that it can lead us down into seeing this cultural feminist argument where you're saying separate but equal, in the sense that, okay, I'm just going to quote what was said. Men are stronger, so we'll say, okay, women are emotionally stronger, so then you get the whole. But in the latter, I don't know if we can conclude that women are naturally emotionally stronger. Wait, what was the question again?
I think because it's stemmed out of equality. What is equality? And Cedric had said, regardless of the difference,
the Counterpart said.
Yeah, when two come together to make a whole, what's the problem with that? If we say that two have to come together to make a whole, this Counterpart argument.
Well, there's two that come to my mind, at least. The one is this idea that a human on their own who doesn't get married is incomplete.
Yeah.
And that they're not enough. They don't reflect God in their singleness, which I'm sure that should raise red flags for people. And then
that's where my mind, Curtis. Sorry to interject.
Again, we're making it literal, but go on, yeah.
Yeah, we're making it literal in that respect. And then the second is we can easily fall into this binary: a man needs a woman and a woman needs a man to make that, and the different attributes that they give off make that whole, which falls into the cultural feminist model, in my mind at least.
Yes. And so if we go back to, I suppose, why did God create Adam and Eve in the first place? And what was the conclusion we came to with that one? Why did God make Adam and Eve in the first place?
Lonely and procreation.
And relationship.
So God.
Could you elaborate, Natalie, on what you mean by why did God create Adam and Eve in the first place? You said procreation. What did you mean by that?
Sorry, I meant like I think it was the first thought was loneliness, and then kind of repeated with Adam. The animals were not enough because animals don't have the same experience as humans and can't with yourself. So Adam was lonely and needed a helpmate. And then Eve, I think it was, as Parminder said, procreation he put on the board anyway. To procreate, I think he mentioned, I've got a picture of it. Yeah.
Is that why, I guess that's answering the second question, which is why did God make Eve and not Adam by themselves? So that was more procreation, but does the Godhead make humans for procreation? I don't think so. Well, okay, makes humans because they're lonely. So
I did say two things. God made Adam because he was lonely, needed a counterpart.
Yeah.
The angels are not like God.
Angels are not what?
Angels or anybody else are not like God. God had to create something in his own image. He was lonely.
And that's what
there was nothing like them.
Yeah. So loneliness, I think we put as the first thing, really. And what did you say, Cedri? She said something else. Companionship. Did you say relationship? Did you say relationship?
Yes, you did.
Relationship. So I think if we say, I think the procreation is more for Eve. So I guess lonely is the same in a way, relationship. So there's something about the Godhead, even though there's three of them, and as Natalie alluded to the fact that there's angels and there's unfallen worlds out there that we assume, or do we know they were created before us? I think we know that. Correct me if I'm wrong. And okay. So there's a chat going on in the chat, which I'm missing. Okay, should we keep it together? And so Richard's put, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that's able to receive it, let him receive it. So this is obviously something about someone choosing to be on their own and receiving that.
But it also emphasizes the seriousness for heaven's sake.
Yeah. So you mean they're dedicated to heaven, so they're going to stay single? Maybe that's a slightly different point, but yeah, I think.
Well, for heaven's sake, there has to be eunuchs who are put in the everlasting gospel as everything. Otherwise, heaven won't be filled up as much as it ought to be.
So there's something about people
They're
down
happy
here
to
that are
live on
choosing to
fallen
see.
earth, doing
Yeah,
what they want with a libertarian ethos, and just
okay. So let's not go there quite yet. So so the point about God's making humans. I don't know where Magda's put. How do you know that was a few hours? I think there's not much.
Yeah, that could include females as well as males.
Who put a few hours? I don't know. Someone said a few hours, did they?
Leon did. Leon put that, I think.
Oh, a few hours. Okay. Can you understand and get lonely from being alive for a few hours? Okay. Do you not understand this properly, Leon? I think the loneliness is more so this aspect of Adam recognizing that all the other creation, there was this pairing and a realization from Adam that there was nobody that looked like him. Yeah. So this is what we talked about, how one of the first things that happens is the animals are brought to Adam. And first of all, Adam names them, which is giving them some kind of identity. And when you name something, names are hugely significant in scripture, as we know. It's
just look like him.
Symbol of character. So there's something about animals getting a name which gives them an identity and a character. And Adam recognizing now that Adam hasn't got that other half, and there's nobody that looked like Adam to go with Adam, so that feels that loneliness, as Curtis said, and Leon's put the sixth day. Yeah. So there's something about God being lonely, even though there's all these other worlds and animals, and we touched on that this morning about what was the purpose in Curtis's presentation about what are the differences between us and what does it mean to be reproduced in the image of God, and all the unfallen worlds reflect God's character. I think Ellen White says something along those lines. They're beautiful and they reflect the image of God, but they're not like us.
Noble and majestic.
Noble and majestic, exactly. So there's something positive and godlike about these creatures, but in some way other than free will. So we discussed this morning free will, that we have the ability to create, we have intellectual ability, and we're spiritual beings. Now, I wonder with all the other worlds whether they have that. We did compare us to the animals and say the animals have some level of relationship and some level of understanding and ability to grow and teach their young things. But there's something about that, I don't know if I said that this morning, about reasoning, that they can't, that was brought up this morning, that they can't reason beyond what they can see. So we have some concept about things we can't see, which I suppose you could label as spirituality, that there's something about the spiritual realms that we understand. And I think as well, it's emotion. So do the animals have ability to feel sad, depressed, happy, joy? Because something about God wanting us to have joy and happiness and increase in that happiness as we learn and grow, which I don't think the animals have. I don't think we have enough information to know about the unfolding worlds and why they weren't enough for the Godhead. We just know that we were the crowning act, which was kind of like the highest act or the highest order of creation to be made and the closest to the Godhead than had come before. And we don't even know why we're closer to Lucifer, really, but I don't think, unless anyone has any ideas. Curtis, what do you want to add?
I just wanted to bring out, the more I think about it, the more things I point out that, or I see in some part of God's creation that already exist. You brought out emotion, for instance. We know that angels have emotion because they were sad. We know that animals have emotion. Maybe not to the same level or whatever the case may be. Anyway, the more I think about it, the more I get perplexed as to what sets us apart. And I guess, as you pointed out, we have zero information about all those other unfallen worlds. So we don't know what they were created like. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite challenging. So we
also, sorry, all the other things that God created, they was kind of like content in their own. It was like environments were created for them. The 144,000 are going to follow the Godhead around wherever. Jesus is going to be on this earth, isn't it? So there's still things that I don't quite understand. There's loads of things I don't understand.
Yeah, there's something in that about God spending time with human beings, though. Like every day in the garden, God comes to spend time with Adam and Eve before sin. So we know there's a close relationship being built there, and there's this idea of growth. Something that came to me is, and I don't know if this is direct. It's not really directly answering the question, but the fact that we know with us, with animals, with plants, with everything. We have to keep growing, otherwise we die. And that growth for us is usually intellectual awareness, it's emotional awareness. We're growing in information and knowledge about things through experience. And I think that's something we perhaps don't conceptualize with God, that God had perhaps made these things. And is it possible that even God grew in their knowledge and understanding of how to make something more like them? And that's where we're the crowning act, not because God waited the best till last. Is it something about God not being able to experience what was actually missing until it's done? I don't know if that's blasphemy to even think about the fact that God doesn't know everything or has experienced everything, but the idea that we have to grow and we're increasing in knowledge all the time. If we're in the image of God, is that how the Godhead is? So they come together, say, we want to make some things like us, and then they make other worlds or angels and realize actually there's something a bit missing here. Let's make something that's more capable of being like us. I don't know whether there's a growth process there with the Godhead about now this crowning act of creation is the best we've done so far after we've done these other, but that would imply the rest were not good, but we know everything would be good, but there's levels of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you're right in the sense because humans are so are the image of God, that God surely would be able to reflect and learn something from his own creation. It's a mirror of themselves. Sorry. So I think you're right in that. Some learning there for both.
And yes, learning something and experiment. I think this has been alluded to before. I think it's Elder Perminder anyway. Someone else has said this about knowing about it is one thing, but actually experiencing it is another. So they knew from eternity that Christ would come and die, but to actually go through that experience, even for the Godhead, is something different than actually having an intellectual knowledge about it on it. And I don't know how we process that, because we know that it feels God knows everything from beginning to end, experientially and intellectually, even without having to go through it. But there still seems to be something about experiencing something which is different than actually having that intellectual knowledge of it. I don't know, Curtis.
You brought out an interesting thing of, and I guess Ellen White alludes to this, of God knowing the plan of salvation from eternity, and that has perplexed my mind for ages, because if God's plan was for humanity to pass the test, if you want to call it that, are we inferring that it was predestined for them to fail, and then this plan was initiated, and etc., etc.? And in my mind, as soon as you have free will for a human being, there's that agency from that free will to do something that you don't expect, even from God's perspective, because then it wouldn't be free will if you do it and God saw it coming, because it's not free will anymore. And so the way that I've reconciled it is that I don't think God saw that that was going to happen, as opposed to God in their infinite wisdom saw the quantillionth possibilities that could happen when they did create, and the various outcomes that would take place. And one of them was that Jesus would die. But I guess in my mind, it's that it was never a certainty that Jesus would have to die. It was a possibility, and we're just playing out one of those, the possibility that happened. This is me just orating one of the dilemmas I've had in my mind of reconciling free will and God knowing what's going to happen.
So you're saying even though God knew that was a possibility, God knew that was a possibility, giving free will was a big risk, that they would choose to use that free will negatively, they would choose the wrong thing. And even with that, so God made a plan to step in and sacrifice Christ, that they would agree to do that in case humans use the free will wrongly. But at the same time, the dilemma is that we know God knows the end from the beginning. So Godhead knew that humans would do that, choose the wrong thing. And so they knew that Jesus would have to die. But you're saying, go on.
Yeah, so I was suggesting the latter, that it wasn't that God knew for certain that humanity would choose wrong. Because if they did, I guess it kind of seems like pointless. Like, why would you do this plan knowing that it's going to go wrong? Knowing that things are going to go pear-shaped. Why wouldn't you just do a plan that you know things would go right?
Because it's not about God, it's about them having an experience.
So then
It's
we
about
ask
it's about the people having the experience and them going through it, even though God would have known that.
So I get this comes back to what I'm pointing out to say is that, are we saying that it was predestined for sin to exist? It was predestined for there to be evil, from time eternity, from before there was any creation. It was predestined that this was going to happen. Not just predestined, predetermined that it was going to happen to have that experience. And I'm suggesting that Adam and Eve could have got that knowledge of who God is and etc. without falling. It just would have taken a different path. And I think that's what Natalie said, that there's a plan B and a plan A, and God had a plan A, that if Adam and Eve chose the right option, because what I'm hearing from the different contributions is that they didn't actually have a choice in the matter. It was always going to go one way. And I don't believe that we don't have choices in life.
So the God of heaven knew, once he gave a created being, the highest created being, an opportunity to be as God.
Yes.
And then like that test that came upon Lucifer, he wanted all the attention on himself, that through humanity that could manifest again. There was a possibility that it could manifest, but there was a possibility that they could obey God's voice, and then God could have a perfect plan and resolving the issue of the rebellion in heaven without having to physically die on the cross.
Well, it's about the two. It's about the two, because they still had a choice to choose the right, didn't they? They still had a choice, and that's why God has to give us free will. They still had a choice. I think that God knew what they were going to do, but it had to be acted out. They had to go through the experience, because they would have known. God told them, "Don't do this," right? So they still had a choice. It was their choice to do what they did. God didn't do that. He gave them. That's why he gives us free will. He gives us free will to make that choice. And I think he already knew what was going to take place, but they still had to go through a test and still got to go through an experience and understand what, you know what I mean, and so forth. That's what I think, anyway.
So I think Chris's point was free will means it cannot be predetermined, really. I think that's kind of what I was summarizing from what he's saying, because if they've truly got free will, it means they can choose. I suppose that's what you're saying, David, that they can choose at any stage to do what they want, because that's what free will is. So that's really risky, because they can choose any time to rebel against what the right thing to do is, or to do the wrong thing. Yeah. And it's fitting that with the fact that God knows everything doesn't mean that God predetermined that to happen, even though that's the way they went.
That's what I'm saying, because I think that God, don't get me wrong, God's all knowing, and he knows from the end, from the beginning. So he knew this was going to take place. But they had to go through this test to have that experience. You know what I mean?
So you're saying, even though God knew that was going to happen, Adam and Eve had to go through this experience, so that because there was no other way of doing it without giving them free will. So that there's something about, that's what God almost has to operate like that, because that's the only right way to do it.
He gives them a choice.
But God gives them a choice.
I'll just give a simple example to demonstrate.
Sorry, Christian. Charity, for ages. Hold the example, Curtis. Go on, blessing.
Okay. Yes. I wanted to say earlier on about what you mentioned about experience, that God knowing things intellectually versus experientially.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say, I think it would not be true to say God understands or understood everything experientially, which is why part of the plan of salvation involved God coming as a human being to experience life as a human being, and thus become an effective we normally say advocate or mediator, and that there's a work that God has to do that involves God understanding the human experience and understanding sin by experience. I think prior to Jesus coming to the earth, let me say prior to sin, yes, the Godhead might have known that going against the principles of self-sacrifice and love can be detrimental. But that's just knowing it as an abstract concept as opposed to a reality, because no one had died before that point. No one had experienced sin. So I think even Ellen White alludes to that fact that when Jesus came to the earth, Jesus understood what justice meant. When Jesus was in Gethsemane, going through the experience of being separated from the other person of the Godhead, who was Jesus' partner, the experience was different than the prior, I'll call it intellectual knowledge. But the other thing that I wanted to say in relation to Curtis's point is it seems like, well, this is just a thought that's in my mind, that the way God knows the future is the same way that we can know the future, which is why we have been given rules, methodology. And increasingly we are learning that God operates on the same rules we are meant to operate on. The rules that are given to us are the rules in which God operates. When we say we have the mind of God, we are basically using parables, we're using the same methodology that God used. So why I'm bringing that up is, Ellen White is clear that the Godhead knew beforehand about the rebellion of Lucifer and the results that were going to come because of that. So, what did I want to say? Sorry, I was distracted a bit. So what I wanted to say about that is, to some degree, for example, there's an event I can't think of. Okay, maybe the nomination of Donald Trump. The nomination of Donald Trump to become the official Republican nominee was something that could be foreseen for some time. And the reason why it could be seen that, this is going to happen is because of evidence that existed at that point that could be threaded from the past. So you could thread from the past to the present and project into the future that based on this information, this is what's going to happen. And it's going to happen with certainty. You're not saying maybe this is what's going to happen. This is certainly going to be what's going to happen. So what the thought that I'm bringing out basically and trying to suggest is that when God knew about the rebellion of Lucifer, could it not be related to certain things that the Godhead observed about Lucifer prior, Lucifer's behavior, prior to the point where Lucifer actually started acting out when the crisis point came, when, the decision that prompted Lucifer to start going in that direction really came. Because even in the spirit of prophecy, Ellen White seems to suggest that before the whole crisis blew up and Lucifer started complaining, sowing doubt among angels, Lucifer had already started to basically compete with Christ in terms of, the roles that they fulfill and taking on certain responsibilities that were not necessarily within Lucifer's remit. And I don't know how long that happened for, but this was before the whole rebellion that we usually mark to say. Lucifer's now rebelling. Lucifer's not even cooperating the Godhead, or at least has started challenging the Godhead and having, ill feelings, etc. So what I'm just basically trying to say that we know the future or can see the future by using methodology or rules. And is that not the same way that God then sees the future, using the same methodology and the rules?
That makes sense to me, but I don't know how much of that is, and whether there's still a side of God, obviously, that knows everything. are we just limiting God to that, or is there something else about foreknowledge, or is that just the way the Bible describes this foreknowledge? Because I think we would all still think that God has some ability we don't have about that.
Because I would think that God understands the rules of life, like they're experts on it, way better than we would. So their ability to make connections and see things would be definitely clearer than us.
Sharper, yeah.
But it's still subject to rules. That's
right.
You can tell that the way 6,000 years has been taken out of eternity. You can tell God knew, but it's just the depth of what he knew.
Oh, what God knew more. The depth.
And even with us having free will, with the disobedience in the garden.
And you get a taste of that, don't you? Being a parent or knowing any children, you know pretty much what they're going to do in advance.
Yeah.
But you still go ahead and have children, or still go ahead and say the same thing, and knowing that they're not going to do what you say, or they're going to go the opposite way. And you
taste of the Godhead.
Yeah.
You're getting a taste of the Godhead being a parent.
Yes. Yeah.
Responsibility of the Godhead.
And it isn't that you make the child do that. You just see from their character, this is what they're going to do.
They've got to
the time
angels without knowledge, so they need to learn how to get knowledge so they can defeat the evil angels
and do the right thing. Curtis, I know we're coming to 8:30. We've taken longer than I thought to get to the 3 questions, which we didn't even get to.
Yeah.
Go on, Curtis.
I just wanted to bring up something that maybe will illustrate what I was trying to bring across a bit better. Was, you can answer this in your own head at least. How many people genuinely believe that there was a possibility of God coming in 1863? And at least I do. I believe that was a possibility, if things had happened the way that they were supposed to for God to come in 1863. But if God was meant to come in 1863, then which end did God know from the beginning? The end in 1863 or the end in a few years' time, when God does come for the second time? Like, which is the end that God knew? And so my point is that when we speak about God knowing everything, my suggestion is that God knows the possibilities of what could happen in life, the million possibilities that could happen based on the choices that humans make. And so in that 1850s history, humans make a specific choice. And so God sees a possibility of them coming or not coming. And then since humans make the choice that they do make, they don't come. So I think that for me is the clearest place to see that when we say God knows everything, what really are we saying? Because if they did know everything the way we see it, that they were going to come hypothetically in 2030, then it was never a possibility for Jesus to come in 1863.
That's more light on when Abraham was tested and the angel said, "Now I know thou fearest."
Sorry, what?
The judgment of Abraham's test, when the knife was stopped from sacrificing Isaac, the judgment of the living. Now I know thou fearest me. So that's kind of like more light on that for my little mind, anyway. So you're
Emma,
heaven knew the end for made in 63, but because he's knowledgeable, creative, and he answers prayers, and if he's got willing instruments, he
can we pause for prayer for Sabbath?
Yeah, it's closing Sabbath almost here anyway, isn't it? 35. I think on that point, I think what Curtis was saying, God knows the the way I saw that, what you just said was God knew the end.
Are we happy talking through the closing of Sabbath?
I think we've got 2 more minutes. Well, it's a bit
you are.
Anyway, we'll finish off anyway, because I think it's been an hour and a half anyway, so we will finish in prayer. But I think that last point is that, for me anyway, is that God does know the ultimate end, but it doesn't mean that all those other places it couldn't have happened, but God still knew that it wouldn't happen. If that makes any sense. But anyway, that's food for thought. People can think about that further. So we didn't really get back onto the creation of the the sequence of why they were made that way, but people who've watched it can come back and talk about that another time. So thank you for your participation. I was just thank you for spending Sabbath. It's been a nice Sabbath. Let's
thank you, Emma.
Close with prayer. Yeah. Dear loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to once more discuss your word with each other. Help us to expand our minds. Help us to be prepared for different thoughts, different possibilities than we've thought before, that we might grow and stretch ourselves, that we might not be shaken by things that perhaps we hear that are different from what we've always believed or what we thought we knew. We thank you for your loving watch care over us, that you are constantly trying to restore in us your image and to bring us closer to you than before we'd even sinned. It's a miracle to us that we can still have that relationship with you in spite of all the wickedness that exists in this planet, that you still want us to be your counterpart. Please help us as we press on this journey to rise above our temporal challenges and to focus on spiritual heavenly things, to really have faith that you are with us, guiding and directing our steps. I know that each of us, as we enter a new week, we thank you for this Sabbath and for the refreshing that we receive. And we pray that you would gird up our loins as we face a new week of challenges, that you would be with each one of us in our various circumstances and help us to see that you always meet our needs, whatever they are. Help us to continue to trust you and to keep growing in faith, especially as we see the end approaching. Please help us not to be weary in well-doing. Thank you for this opportunity. We pray now that you would keep us safe until we speak again. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. God bless everyone. Bye.
Have a blessed week.
Amen.
Bye.
Thank you.